Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m. It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
It's a very good evening to you. A warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Thank you so much for joining us as we bring you the news, views, faces and the voices that matter, the perspectives that matter, and that is your perspective. +27 63 9126. We'd like to hear your thoughts on some of the stories that we're covering. A major theme today will be looking at, of course, war, peace, security, and transformative states. What sort of support mechanisms they are, and also are they in line with the people that they govern? All that and more coming up on the program today. Let's first start with your top stories this hour.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has defended his decision not to fire Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, instead putting him on special leave while receiving his full salary and ministerial benefits. Ramaphosa has faced harsh criticism for leaving out Mchunu when he announced that action would be taken against government officials implicated in the ongoing probe into police corruption. Ramaphosa has assured members of the media that when the time is right, he will respond to all the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry recommendations.
The Madlanga Commission issued an interim report, and I have studied it, and I've accepted the recommendations, and the work of the Commission continues. And I know people have specifically asked about Minister Mchunu, and I have said I am waiting for that process to be completed, and it's going to be completed in 3 months. And I'm not going to, in the end, let the Madlanga Commission report or recommendations not be implemented. The problem at times is that people focus on one issue. Like right now, they're focusing on Minister Mchunu.
Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has blamed the Boko Haram militant group for a recent shooting attack on 2 villages in the country's western state of Kwara. The attackers gunned down dozens of people before setting fire to shops and homes, along with the residents of the traditional healer. The BBC's Makuochi Okafor has those details.
The president last night put out a statement, and he did actually blame Boko Haram group, which has sort of been active in Nigeria for decades, for this attack. He did call it cowardly and beastly. His statement said the people in the community were attacked for refusing to adopt a more extreme doctrine, and he has said he's given orders for state and federal agencies to work together to see that those who had committed these atrocities wouldn't go scot-free.
United Nations Human Rights Chief Volker Turk has appealed for funds, warning that donor cuts have reduced the work of his agency to survival mode. He's asked for $400 million, $100 million less than last year. The BBC's Imogen Folks has more.
Human rights gets only a small fraction of the United Nations overall budget, but in 2025, member states still contributed less than they had promised. Human rights work in Yemen and Myanmar was cut back. Investing in human rights is an investment in peace for everyone, the UN believes. But with traditional donors in the US and Europe increasingly focused on economic challenges at home, it may be hard to convince them.
And further afield, 2 days of talks between Ukraine, Russia and the United States aimed at ending Moscow's war have ended with the exchange of more prisoners of war. 314 captured soldiers, half from each side, have been swapped, the first such exchange in 4 months. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports from Kiev.
Prisoner swaps did happen before the US got involved here, and there's no hint of any breakthrough on the big issue at the heart of any peace deal. That is, control over land in the eastern Donbass, where fighting remains intense. Russia demands Ukraine hands over the rest of the region that it hasn't conquered, and Kyiv will only agree to freezing the fighting at the current front line. Even then, it also wants firm guarantees from its allies that they would enforce any ceasefire. And Russia has made it clear it won't accept any arrangement that brings NATO troops into Ukraine.
And finally, the Donald Trump administration is increasing efforts to secure U.S. supplies of critical minerals. It has called on dozens of countries to join Washington in a preferential trade zone. The EU and Japan have announced a strategic partnership with the U.S. regarding supply chains. Speaking in Washington, Japan's Foreign Minister Iwayo Hori outlined the bloc's importance.
Any supply chain disruption would bring significant impact on the global economy. We should work together to address this challenge. To prevent such supply chain disruptions, the key is to diversify supply sources, including the refining and processing of geographically concentrated critical minerals.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. 1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
If you've just joined us, we continue with Africa World Hour this Thursday, and we look at the situation in South Sudan, as there have been reports of a major attack. International aid organizations, Doctors Without Borders, saying its hospital in South Sudan's Jonglei state was hit by an airstrike on Tuesday night, destroying the hospital's main warehouse and most of its critical medical supplies. Following the attack, the organization released a statement accusing South Sudanese government forces of being the only armed party in the country with the capacity to perform such an aerial attack. For more on what is happening on the ground, we're joined now on the line by independent journalist Patrick Oyet, who joins us from South Sudan's Central Equatoria state. Patrick, a very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Let us just first start with this, because this is the most alarming aspect of the reports that are coming out, that there are health officials who have gone missing. What have you heard about that?
Yes, that is correct. That is the information that we have here in South Sudan. And this is because when the bombardment took place, according to MSF, people ran in different directions. And this state we are talking about, Jonglei, is the biggest state in South Sudan. And it is just like many parts of South Sudan, with the very, very poor infrastructure in terms of road network, as well as telecommunication network. There are areas with no telecommunication network. You have to use a satellite phone to communicate to people. So due to the fact that when the bombardment took place, people ran to different directions, we understand some people went to what we call cattle camps. Cattle camps are basically in the bushes, very far away from any form of development. We understand some people could have crossed to Ethiopia, because this Jonglei state also borders Ethiopia, and some people are just in the bushes. So that's why contacting them has become difficult because of poor network, poor road network, and most of those areas are only accessible by air. So that is the situation. So people are still scattered in the bushes.
And just tell us about the gravity of the airstrike and just how wide an area it hit, because I also want to just get a sense of its occupation at the time of the attack.
Well, these are two places, and why it matters a lot. Why it matters a lot is that, as I said, many parts of South Sudan are really, really underdeveloped in terms of road infrastructure, in terms of health infrastructure. A lot of health services in this country are provided by aid agencies such as MSF, and therefore, where they have set up camps, such as in those two places that have been bombed, are areas that are highly populated. So you have a very vast piece of land that actually many of the places have no people, but people have settled in several centers, such as the ones that have been bombed. So once such violence occur, it displaces a lot of people. You find one health center run by MSF, for example, treats more than 200,000 people. So once that is taken away from the people basically have nothing to do, especially now when we have also cholera outbreak in Jonglei State, in particular in an area called Duk. There is cholera outbreak because of also displacement. So people are running to some areas they feel is safe, but then when they go there, there is no safe water for them. There are no health facilities now, and then you have this cholera outbreak. So in as much as these are only two places that have been bombed, the impact is huge as far as the population is concerned.
And I want to look at the attack in the first area, the Lankin area, which I believe is near the Ethiopian border. Do we understand whether there has been as much damage or greater damage or less? Can you just let us know what you've learned so far?
We are relying heavily on the report by the MSF, which says some of its personnel have been injured and some are still missing. And of course, the population have dispersed. Now, the problem is getting to these areas. As journalists in South Sudan, it's extremely difficult. You have to rely on air transport. Either you have to charter a plane to go to these areas, or you have to rely on United Nations flights that go to those areas, or even the flights by MSF, aid agencies generally, to go to those areas and verify what is going on. This at the moment is not happening because of also the restrictions that have been put by the government for people to access those places.
And as you say, I mean, the figures of the people who, I assume these are IDPs as well, who are in those camps, numbers in the hundreds of thousands. And MSF in this case has said that it believes government forces may be behind the aerial strike because only they have the capacity to do so. Are you able to share perspective on whether there has been concurrence of this or there has been any reaction from the accusation?
Well, the government has not responded, especially the military. It has not responded. But it is true. What MSF says is true because previously there have been cases also in another region, in Upper Nile region, which also borders Jonglei State. And that was 2025, where the government has been using their gunship helicopters, bombing places, including Nasir and other places. So it's true that the only, in this fighting, the party that has really aerial power is the government. And the government prior to this had given an ultimatum to people who are in areas that are controlled by the forces loyal to First Vice President, who is now suspended, Riek Machar, to evacuate, and saying they were going to go on offensive on the rebel-held areas. So if this has happened, then definitely MSF is therefore right to say this is done by government troops, even though the government troops have not come out to really deny. But the fact that they had said they were going to go on offensive, ask people to leave those areas, shows that this action is done by them.
And just tell us a little bit more about the conflict between the government forces and the armed military of the opposition. What is the state of the hostilities at the moment?
Well, there are several factors. Number one, these groups, especially the ones that are belonging to the First Vice President, now suspended, Riek Machar. They say they are fighting because the agreement that was signed in 2018 that brought Riek Machar back to government has collapsed because their leader has been arrested. He's facing trial charge of treason and crimes against humanity. That's why they are fighting. But then we have seen a number of troops from other armed groups also joining them, also saying they don't see a future in this implementation of this peace agreement. So that's what has driven the fighting. Then the government forces, because in December 2025, coming to January, they were losing ground, and they lost a lot of bases. So they started now pushing the opposition forces back. But then, as the fighting was going on, especially last week, President Salva Kiir sent one of his former generals, who is a special envoy now, an advisor to him, to go to Jonglei State where fighting is taking place. He went and visited several places. When he returned to Juba, immediately we saw President Salva Kiir forming what we call a delegation that is supposed to sit and come up with a panel that is supposed to come up with a plan on dialogue. And they say that this dialogue is basically on election. But what we know is that this dialogue is to end the violence, because you can't talk about election without ending the violence. Then after, the fighting started reducing. The violence started reducing, and especially in Jonglei State. But then it has moved to the western part of the country that borders Democratic Republic of Congo, where the former governor, who is loyal to Riek Machar, and when he was removed, there was some fighting, and he had gone to the bush, was arrested. But generally, the fighting has subsided due to the announcement of a dialogue. There is a bit of hope, because the group that is loyal to Riek Machar, who are out of the country, apart from the armed group that is in the field, has also received a framework of dialogue from Kenyan envoy. So this was an effort, or this is an effort that is giving a little bit of hope that the violence can end and people can enter into dialogue. So because of that, the fighting has, for the past few days, subsided a bit.
But the question then becomes, why hit humanitarian infrastructure? Because MSF itself says that it has given GPS coordinates of all facilities to government forces. And in this case, it is accusing the government of being behind the airstrike that struck these facilities. Because then the question would be, do the opposition forces not have these coordinates?
Well, number one is, first of all, the government having told people to evacuate those places meant the attack. They also asked the NGOs to leave. So that meant probably if they were going to start attack, it was going to be more indiscriminate, which is very unfortunate. But also, we also know that in South Sudan we have troops that came from Uganda, and these troops are here on invitation of the government of President Salva Kiir. And we know that these troops also have equipment such as airplanes, warplanes, and helicopters, and so forth. So, in as much as those coordinates have been provided by the MSF, it is possible also that some of the bombing that is taking place is not being done by the South Sudanese forces. It's possible that it is in coordination with Ugandan forces, who maybe do not know those coordinates or have not been shown those coordinates. This is just a speculation from my side, honestly, because I don't know the facts as far as the coordinates and things like that are concerned. But the fact that we have troops here from Uganda that previously have also been involved in these airstrikes, it is possible to conclude that some of the airstrikes are done by their partner, that is the Ugandan forces that are here.
All right. So what is expected over the next couple of days, even towards the weekend? You've mentioned that the fighting has subsided. Is there hope of at least somewhat more peaceful days over the next coming days?
There is hope among many South Sudanese that we talk to. People want to see, because the panel that was formed has been given 2 weeks to come up with a framework on how the dialogue should go. 1 week is coming to an end on Friday this week, and then by Friday next week, hopefully a plan, or before that, a plan will be out, and then people will start reacting to it. And therefore, there is a bit of hope that the dialogue will end this violence. However, the concern for many South Sudanese people is that several agreements have been made between these warring groups, and implementation has always been a problem. So even if they agree, it will in most cases be only a matter of when they will start fighting again, which is a concern. So what next? What exactly are they going to do differently to ensure that a lasting peace returns to the country is the concern of many people. But there is hope that at least the current violence can end with the dialogue.
Well, thank you so much for giving us the very latest, Patrick. Patrick Oyet is an independent journalist, just sharing with us details about what is happening in South Sudan.
Thank you.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Broadcast excellence, rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And moving on now, just about 21 and a half past 9 here on Africa World Hour, bringing you the very latest news from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. As we usually say, one planet, countless stories, and we bring you the perspective that matters, and that is the African perspective. So do share with us your thoughts on some of the stories that we're covering, and if you have a different view of what we're reporting. Like on this next story, Zimbabwe's status as a reformist state facing its steepest challenge yet. Despite the landmark abolition of the death penalty as recently as December 2024, the Human Rights Watch World Report 2026 paints a grim picture of a country where the law is increasingly used as a weapon against its own citizens. For a look at the report and some of its findings, we're joined now on the line by a senior Africa researcher at Human Rights Watch, Idris Ali Nasser. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me.
So this was part of a wider report, but let's zero in on Zimbabwe and look at the salient issues of the outcomes of this report. What did you find most alarming that you should say that its status as a reformist state is increasingly under pressure?
So on February the 4th, we released our world report, which looks at the state of human rights in various countries. And for Zimbabwe, we did raise a number of issues, including the fact that Zimbabwe has continued with its crackdown on civil society, crackdown on freedom of expression, crackdown on peaceful assembly, crackdown on dissent. That Zimbabwe has continues to weaponize law by passing restrictive laws that crack down on people's abilities to freely engage in political discourse in the country. So there's several legislation, and Zimbabwe over the years has actually perfected this art of legislating against peaceful civil engagement. And the previous year has not been any different.
And just if there were incidents that brought this starkly to the fore, are you able to name some of them?
Indeed, I mean the long use of domestic law as an instrument of repression was brought to the fore in April, for example, when the president signed into law the Private Voluntary Organizations Amendment Act, which law really restricts the operations of non-governmental organizations by, among other things, scrutinizing their ownership, among other things, scrutinizing their sources of funding. And then these violations, the penalty for violating this law are very severe, including criminal prosecution for leaders of non-governmental organizations. The penalties ranging from heavy fines to imprisonment. One of the problematic aspects of this law is that non-governmental organizations are not allowed to act in what they call the politically partisan manner. The law could allows for a minister to shut down operations of non-governmental organizations with very little recourse to judicial review.
And speaking of that, on the judiciary, you also highlight the 71-day pre-trial detention of a Blessed Mhlanga journalist in early 2025. How has this incident underscored the weaponization of the criminal justice system in Zimbabwe?
I mean, the right to freedom of expression and the media came under serious threat in the past year, where authorities continued to misuse the criminal justice system to conduct politically motivated arrests and prosecution of human rights defenders, activists, and journalists. The case of Blessed Mhlanga being one example, where he was arrested for nothing other than doing his job as a journalist and spent 71 days, no less, in prolonged pre-trial detention. The effect of that is a chilling effect on civil society leaders, human rights defenders, journalists, lawyers even, that you could be arrested and detained, kept in prolonged pretrial detention for nothing but just doing your job. And it was not only Blessed Mhlanga, there was also Faith Zaba, an editor of a critical independent newspaper, are again arrested for a satirical column that criticized the president of the country, Emmerson Mnangagwa. There were several people as well, not as prominent, not in the media, but people were sharing critical discourse on WhatsApp videos that were critical of the president, who were arrested. We had one case of a gentleman who spent over a month in detention for having shared a video of somebody criticizing the president, the way he was running the economy. So this really has got a chilling effect on freedom of expression, on political discourse, on how people are able to enjoy their civil and political rights in Zimbabwe. And that is very concerning.
And what does that suggest? That there is surveillance of people's communication on a wide scale? And is there, anybody, as in any single agency that's being fingered as being behind that? I mean, often we hear about the CID as this being their main operation, but what are we learning about, civic freedoms in terms of communication in general?
I mean, the arrests are not, covert. These are not covert operations. I mean, these are people freely, sharing information or talking publicly, criticizing, the president, and someone reports them to the police. So you actually have police, law enforcement authorities would come, knock on someone's door, arrest them for what they would have said or would have shared, or online, or in the case of the journalists, in print or on radio or television. So they're not overt operations. These are operations that are done, I think, with the effect to send a chilling message to everyone that the authorities could arrest and detain for a long time anyone sharing information that they don't like or approve of.
So you mentioned that it's not just journalists, but it's ordinary members of the public. But I want to talk about opposition party leaders and members. How has that treatment extended to them?
I mean, we've got cases of, for example, a man called Ishmael Maukazua, who's a local government, a council member, who was arrested and charged with undermining the authority of the president and also insulting the president. What he had done as well was just sharing a TikTok video of a woman in a WhatsApp group of a woman who was saying, well, the economy is not, being run well, and calling on the president to step down or something like that. But he's an elected council member. All he did was to share information, and for that he was arrested. Again, sending another chilling message that freedoms of expression in Zimbabwe are periled, they're highly curtailed, there's surveillance, and that people can be arrested and jailed for nothing but expressing their political views.
And the police or just law enforcement, are they up to the task when complaints are laid? And I'm thinking here in the case of Job Skala, whose house was bombed, and it seems like nothing has been done as yet.
I mean, the case of Job Sikala in point also talks to the sense of impunity, lawlessness, and lack of accountability when it comes to abuses or violations of rights of those that are in the opposition. After his house was, petrol bombed in a suspected arson attack, according to Job Sikala, and he has gone public about it, that there's not been any credible investigation. He has not been updated by the police on how they are following up on any leads regarding who set his house on fire. He came out about last 2 months or so with an award himself as a private citizen, asking for information, asking for leads, because the police apparently are not doing their job. So that's a culture, that's a pattern we've seen in Zimbabwe over years, that abuses against those that are deemed to be critical of the government are not really investigated. So there's that weaponization of the criminal justice system that leans very heavily and is unfair to those that are deemed to be critical of the government, those that are deemed to be in the opposition. Civil society, human rights defenders don't always get fair justice when it comes to law enforcement.
One of the overarching themes of your report, it speaks about violence against women, particularly in political life, whether they're candidates or political party members, how they continue to suffer rape, assault, abductions, and beatings. Just tell me what you have been able to record in terms of numbers, the trends that exist, and the impunity that you speak of.
We have a report coming out, that speaks to this. We spent time in Zimbabwe researching this, talking to women political activists, supporters of the opposition, candidates in the last general election of 2023, and how some of them have really faced the most egregious human rights violations. That includes physical assaults, arrests, sexual assaults, rape, displacement. And the thread that runs across is that a number of them have gone to report to law enforcement about their violations, these very grave violations, and there's been very little interest, if any, by law enforcement to investigate and to bring the perpetrators to justice, including in cases where the perpetrators are identified and known by the victims, yet the police have not acted to bring them to justice. Again, extending this cycle of impunity where it empowers the perpetrators and disempowers again the victims.
And I want to look at the LGBTI rights under threat. What has your report highlighted about this?
I mean, the Zimbabwe, like many other African countries, have severe violations where sexual minorities do not get the protection that they deserve from the social systems, the criminal justice system, from law enforcement. So there is a cycle of perpetuating abuses and violence against those that are in the sexual minority. And again, we see this in the past year.
And just a quick final one, you do say, though, that you see positive legal change, and though there are shortfalls. Can you highlight some of those?
I mean, while we have serious reservations, against about how the criminal justice system works, we had a case where the Constitutional Court, for example, struck down some provisions, very problematic provisions of the so-called Patriotic Act, which contained some very serious penalties in Section 23A of that act that included, stripping of citizenship of people, including imposition of the death penalty in some case. But the Constitutional Court came and actually deemed some provisions as unconstitutional. That was a glimmer of hope. That was a good direction in respecting constitutional rights for the people of Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much for your time, Idris Ali Nassar, who is from Human Rights Watch. They've done a study, World Report 2026, various countries, and we're looking at the Zimbabwe chapter, and basically what has come out of it is some of the priorities that Zimbabwe needs to focus on just to improve their stature, as he says, as a reformist state, which he says is fast slipping, restoring civic spaces, strengthening the rule of law, protecting vulnerable groups. And another one we needed to touch on is international engagement, but we didn't have time to do that. It is 25 minutes to 10.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And that is exactly what we do on this program, Monday to Friday, 9 to 10 p.m. And this time we look at Libya. From the hopeful sparks of the Arab Spring in 2011 to the chaotic downfall of Muammar Gaddafi's Libya has transitioned from an iron-fisted autocracy to a landscape fractured by militia rule and external interference. This week, the volatile history reached a violent new inflection point with the assassination of Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, once seen as his father's reformist heir and later a leading candidate in the nation's long-delayed election. Saif al-Islam was shot dead in his Zintan home this week. To speak about this, we speak to anti-terrorism specialist and global security analyst Dixon Osagie. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Let's just first start with this event and why it's significant. And you've heard the manner in which I described him, at least according to some pundits, after his father's death and him being in this transitional state up to his murder. Why is this significant for Libya?
Well, it's a very disturbing situation here in the African continent because the North African country, Libya, has been suffering from this security since the elimination of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, and many have thought that Libya would be restored back to its peaceful state, but that's not the case. 16 years down the line, they're still battling with the state of insecurity. And it's so bad, so sad we're hearing about the elimination of Saif Gaddafi. This, for me, I think, is a different ball game, and it's going to also worsen the security situation in Libya, and as well the international community has tried its best. The NATO in 2012 tried to unify the country, but all effort is not yielding result. As it stands now, the gangster in Libya is a disturbing situation.
So up until when he was assassinated, what role was he playing in post-Gaddafi Libya?
Well, Saif is standing out, to maintain his father legacy, Gaddafiism, and as well he has a lot of people that believe in him, and as well you need to also know that he also is trying to vie for a position as a contestant. And I see his assassination is a game plan, and as well they're trying to eliminate Gaddafiism in the northern African region. For me, I think, when it comes to terrorism, a lot of game factor is playing, and a lot of sponsorship is playing. We know that Libya is suffering from this high speed of terrorism, and I strongly believe that with this development, Libya is going to face another phase of insecurity. In 2014, 2016, they went to the second phase of their civil war. And I think this elimination of Saif, I strongly believe, might also take them to third civil war, but God forbid, we pray for restoration of Libya.
And we saw lots of fractures in various movements post the assassination of his father, Muammar Gaddafi. Let's just look back. So from 2011, the international community, they played whatever role that they played, and perhaps you can just give us your analysis of how we came to be at this point and how their interference really has led to the point where Libya is.
Well, many had thought after the elimination of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, Libya, the 7.2 million people would, find a way to, bring their country back to a state of positive peace. But that is not the case. That was not the case. The turnaround was a disturbing situation, and the people of Libya are now being ruled by most of these, militants. Group section of militants. As we speak now, I tell you, there's no unified government in Libya. The east and western region are also fighting for their own survival. So the problem now in Libya is that there's no unified leader. And if a country suffers from a unified leader, what we have is these are a disaster, assassination, killings here and there. And also, as we speak, Libya is in a negative state of security situation. It's a fragile state now because it does not... Probably, I think Libya is a failed state. It's becoming a failed state, fast becoming a failed state. And for that to stop, I think the African country, the North African country, West African country, and the United Nations and also NATO needs to respond with speed and momentum, because what is happening in Libya now is an emergency situation. And I tell you that Libya needs help as we speak, because in the coming days, there's going to be a reprisal attack in the area of Saif Gaddafi, because his people will not lay low without a reprisal attack. And revenging the death of Saif Gaddafi.
And I want to understand who are his people, because we know that post the Gaddafi era, there was a huge fissures that occurred within the powerful elites, and that's why so many movements that have taken arms and against each other. But I'd like to look at Saif himself. He was seen as somebody who could play a positive role because of his Western education and could possibly bring about a political movement of reform post his father. But there are those who saw him as still very much representing that Gaddafiism. So can you just tell us if these are ideological differences, or was it because that there were so many external forces that had an interest in how Libya would finally end up?
Fantastic question. You see, when Gaddafi was alive, it's really against the West. But good enough, Saif had a lot of Western education, and also he believes in the Western style of leadership as well. And when he also tried to come on board to, carry this movement, the Gaddafiism movement, he was gaining momentum from his own people and other factions that are also supporting his move to ensure that they restore Libya to a state of positive peace, or possibly to a state of peace. Because the one thing about being in a state of peace and also being in a state of negative peace, where an incident can spring up and a country can go back to a state of mess. But for Saif Gaddafi, I tell you that he's a very great guy, and a lot of people believe in him. His people believe in him, and they try to see if he can come on board to restore the name of his father, because the people of Gaddafi, of Libya, truly believe in Gaddafi. After the death of Gaddafi, they are missing him a lot, because this thing that he did a lot while he was the head of Gaddafi, the head of Libya. But security is very sensitive, and terrorism is a very, very ideological-driven mentality. Most people believe in ideology instead of taking care of their people. So for me, I think the killing of Saif is ideologically driven. If it wasn't ideologically driven, he wouldn't have been assassinated. So from the Western perspective, they strongly believe maybe if he comes aboard, he might go or take a departure terrorism-driven mentality and also restore Libya. The terrorists, guys, they don't want Libya to survive. They want to, disorganize the country and ensure that Libya does not survive. And that's why I tell you that other African country, Nigeria, for example, is also suffering from the menace of the fallout of Libya. Arms have been, moving from one to another. So it's a sensitive situation as we speak right now in Libya. If anything goes wrong again, other close neighbor countries, Tunisia and other neighboring countries within the North African region is going to be deeply affected.
And I want you to put a pin in that because it's a very important point to look at the implications for regional peace and stability. But I want to, because this is a precursor to this, the fact that prosecutors in Libya have said that they are going to launch an investigation to finding out who is behind his assassination in Zintan. How is this going to happen without a unified security apparatus, or some would even say a credible security apparatus?
Fantastic question. And I tell you, nobody will be ready to volunteer information because over the years, we've discovered that most of the guys who volunteered information to support the government security forces are being attacked or, are being assassinated or killed. So as we speak now, information sharing in the area of terrorism is very, very difficult because nobody wants to be a target of a terrorist. So the Libyan authority have stated very clearly that they are going to launch an investigation. So for me, I think they've commenced their follow-up investigation and the world is waiting and trying to see what happened after the end of the investigation. But I can tell you as a security consultant and someone who have studied the happenings in Libya and other country, they might not be successful in this area because Libya is divided. It's not unified as we speak. East and West, they are not unified, and the militant rule in some part of the region is a disturbing situation. But I wish them good luck if they have an effective, close monitoring system that track the situation and see if those guys that eliminated him can be captured in a CCTV camera. But I strongly believe that if that is done, they will be able to get something good from it. But this should not be led to this should not be swept under the carpet. They must go all out to ensure that the perpetrators are brought to book. If that is established and achieved, I tell you, the people of Libya will be very grateful for this investigation activity by the state government. But I strongly believe that nothing is going to come out from it because Libya has been messed up with a lot of terrorist groups and a lot of terrorist gangs within the east, west, south, and north of Libya. It's a disturbing situation and very worrisome.
And those are obviously sponsored by somebody, and therefore I want to look at the geopolitical ripples. We've seen Russia be critical of these events, and obviously you would have the US have its own stance, and other countries who have a keen interest in the outcome in Libya. What do you foresee happening, not only internationally, but as you mentioned, that there are already ripple effects on the continent regionally?
Conflict of interest. Russia has their own interest, the United States has their own interest, and Russia and the United States of America, they are also not in good terms, and everyone is trying to have a presence within Libya. And I tell you, that is also going to escalate the situation with Libya. And I strongly believe that if our countries or nations are left to govern themselves and without interference, we will not be here today. One of the reasons why Libya has come to this state of mess is because of interference, excessive interference from other nations in the world, the West and other parts of the country, which led to the killings of Gaddafi. But for me, I think Russia and Americans should just allow Libya to breathe and allow the people themselves to carry out this investigation and also see how they can support and unify these people. The country is just 7.2 million, not even half of the population of Lagos. People are dying every day. The people are dying every day. Passing through Libya is a very, very dangerous route to travel, and it's a travel risk country. So for me, I think the West should allow Libya's authority to, to lead without interference, so that they'll be able to bring their country to a state of prosperity and also ensure they support them in the area of armaments to wipe out these gangsters, this terrorist group. Bedeviled the country. But it's a very difficult one because the people themselves, they've been infiltrated with a lot of terrorist gangs, and a lot of people are taking up arms to protect themselves. So Libya is becoming a crime scene and a crime zone.
And share a little bit more about the movement of arms from Libya. Where are the arms going to? Who are they supporting? And surely there is a flow back of arms into Libya. Where do those arms come from?
Well, the arms can come from anywhere. It can come from manufacturers because manufacturers of arms and ammunition want to sell their arms and ammunition. And that is why I think the world and the West has not done a lot in the area of gun tracing. Gun tracing is very important to ensure that whenever you get arms in the hands of terrorist group, you pick up this gun and check the number and see where this arm is coming from. Is it coming from Russia? Because, for example, one of the major arms and ammunition these guys are using in Russia is Kalashin, AK-47. Kalashin was established in 1947 by a man called Sergeant Kalashnikov. This arm been made in Russia. So we need to start looking at gun tracing. But I tell you that since the fall of Gaddafi, most of these arms have gotten over has left the hands of the government and now flowing around African region and also coming into Libya as well. So for me, I think gun tracing is also going to assist if the West are ready to help, so that we know which manufacturers are manufacturing these arms and sending it to this terrorist group to fight their own people. Then the exception of that as well, the borderline is very porous. Other African borderline is very porous, and the porosity of those borderline, made it very easy for arms to flow into Libya and out of Libya, and also affecting other western parts of Africa and north part of Africa and eastern part of Africa. And that's why the Sahel region is one of the most dangerous places to live on earth. And I tell you that if we have an effective mechanism in place to monitor the flow of illicit arms and ammunition, I tell you, it's going to really work in the area of managing the state of insecurity in the northern region of Libya.
Dixon Osagie, thank you so much for your time and your insights. He is an anti-terrorism specialist and global security analyst, speaking to us about the situation in Libya following the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi's son. What this will mean, Saif al-Islam's death and the investigation into that, who's behind it, how it will either bring about transparency and therefore prospects for peace, if at all, or further tear apart the warring parties. Brings the time to 9 minutes to 10.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Broadcast excellence. Rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
The United Nations Secretary General has warned that there could be a humanitarian collapse in Cuba. Warning comes amid U.S. threats to tariff any country that supplies oil to the Caribbean island nation. President Donald Trump signed an executive order on January 29th in which he determined that the policies, practices and actions of the Cuban government constituted an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. The order threatens to add an additional levy on countries that provide oil to Cuba, while the United Nations is urging dialogue. Showan Bryce Peace reports.
The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed concern about the deteriorating situation in Cuba, warning that there could be a humanitarian collapse if the country's oil needs remain unmet. His spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric.
The Secretary-General is extremely concerned about the humanitarian situation in Cuba, which will worsen, if not collapse, if its oil needs go unmet. He notes that for more than 3 decades, the General Assembly has consistently called for an end to the embargo imposed by the United States on Cuba. The Secretary-General urges all parties to pursue dialogue and respect for international law.
Cuba's Deputy Foreign Minister Carlos Fernandez de Cosio said they were engaged in contacts with the United States, but that exchanges had not developed into a formal dialogue as yet.
We do not have a table of dialogue between the two countries. We have had exchange of messages. We have embassies. We have had communications, but we cannot say that we have a table of dialogue. Now, the U.S. government knows that we are ready to have a serious, meaningful, and responsible dialogue based on the respect for sovereign equality, respect for international law, and that we are sure that there are many issues that we could discuss, including many on which we have differences, and that perhaps many of them could find solution if there were to be a dialogue between the two countries.
As President Trump was pressed earlier this week about what sort of agreement he was seeking with Havana.
It's a failed nation now, and they're not getting any money from Venezuela, and they're not getting any money from anywhere. It's a failed nation. Mexico is going to cease sending them oil. So I'd like to take care of the people that are here from Cuba. You know, we have many people that came from Cuba that were thrown out of Cuba or that fled Cuba. They came over on rafts. They went through shark-infested waters. I don't know how they did it. And it was many years ago. Many would like to go back. Many would like to at least visit their relatives. And I think we're at a pretty close point. We are dealing with the Cuban leaders right now.
Mexico is currently Cuba's single largest supplier of oil, as the latter faces recurring fuel shortages that have contributed to power generation shortfalls, mass blackouts, and broader economic disruption. Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum indicated that her country hoped to send a humanitarian shipment of oil to Cuba this week without seeking confrontation.
Nuestro objetivo es enviarlo esta semana. Vamos a ver si es posible.
Our goal is to send humanitarian aid this week. We will see if it is possible. Obviously, we also need to know what their needs are, because it is not just a matter of what Mexico decides to send, but rather what is needed in order to send it. So it will be very transparent. We will report on it adequately.
While ordinary Cubans urge dialogue to ease the energy crisis facing the island nation.
I would like there to be a dialogue between Cuba and the United States so that things can be sorted out, so that we as Cubans don't have to go through what we are going through now, the lack of oil, electricity, and those things, so that everything can be more effective, right?
Everyone is concerned, of course, if Venezuela isn't sending fuel and Mexico isn't sending it. Who is going to send it? China and Russia are far away and have always supplied very little. Of course it's worrying, but anyway, let's hope it gets resolved.
The United States Embassy in Havana posted a security alert on X this week, warning that Cuba's national electric grid was increasingly unstable and power outages were occurring daily across the country, affecting water supply, lighting, refrigeration, and communications. It also cautioned Americans in the country or those planning to travel there of an increase in protests directed at the United States. A fully fledged United States economic embargo on Cuba has been in place since 1962. I'm Sherwin Bryce Pease in New York.
And just to let you know about this, SABC2 has refreshed its program lineup, and with only 4 days to go, viewers can look forward to live shows like Eindelijk, Let's Connect, which will bring you big personalities, honest talk, and stories people will be discussing everywhere. Tune in to SABC2.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on African World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
You know, I was giving you flowers, but this technical director of yours, this Didi Malo, I was about to say, speaking of big personalities, honest talk, you know. But now, this Didi Malo.
Listen, you tried. It's the thought that counts. It's
right?
the thought that counts, yes.
So what's coming up on your diary?
So, Talk Thursdays, we're looking at trends. We're going to start off with travel, looking at the Twin Travel Tandem team. We're going to be speaking to a half of the team. They've been to 44 countries.
So what is Twin Travel?
So essentially they are a company that, they're a travel agency. Not so many.
Oh, okay.
Right. But I love how they've branded themselves on social media. So they're the ones traveling. They're showing off what it is that they're doing, how they're connecting with different parts of the world. And so we're going to be exploring that and just looking at the trends in travel. Do people want to travel? Do they want to travel domestically?
Who doesn't want to travel?
Ma'am, you'd be surprised. You would be very surprised.
I feel ill when I physically am not well. Guys, even if I need to go to the next province, no.
There are people who are comfortable. Being a homebody is an understatement. They are comfortable in their square mile, okay? They don't want to leave. And so we're going to talk about why that's the case and, of course, what trends we see in travel. And then in the second hour of the show, we have our very own Stagazelo Dlamini, who will be introducing us to the world of TV and film.
She has not told me this.
Oh, of course. Surprise.
Keeping slick lids. Okay.
Imagine.
All right. Well, that's coming up. Producer Stagazelo Dlamini will be on African Diaries this evening with Shailen Kumana. That's coming up next from us. That's it. And thank you indeed to our technical producer, Didi Malo. Even though you are just not allowing me to give people their flowers. But we thank you. We thank you for your service. And that's how we come out of Africa World Hour. It's good night from us.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World